What's up all you lads and ladies? Welcome to another fascinating video in the world of comedy and Reddit. If you liked the video, post your favorite Reddit comment below, and I'll give you a shout out in my next video. Thanks to Doorknob in my last video who commented that he loved my intro. Doorknob, let me tell you, buddy, I love you. Hope you enjoy this video about World War II, during which Canada gave out buttons to those who wanted to fight, but couldn't due to medical reasons. That sounds pretty British to me. Today I learned that during World War II, Canada gave out buttons to people who tried to enlist, but were refused due to medical reasons to show their willingness to fight. To avoid them being bullied and shamed for not volunteering. Like the whole white feather thing in World War I. The best was when a lady handed a white feather to a guy on the bus in London. He was in town to get his VC from the king. I've read a few stories about men home on leave, but dressed in civilian clothes for some reason and getting handed a white feather. I don't know if I'd ever get over something like that, especially coming from the hull of the Western Front. Particularly at a time when frick you, mind your own business was not in common usage. Imagine it from the perspective of those boys who were shamed into volunteering. Imagine seeing your older brother off to war with all his chums. The entire group of young men from your street all volunteered together and went to France in the same company. Then one day the company ceases to exist and there are a lot of really sad people in your neighborhood. You are a patriotic lad, but you are stating to have second thoughts about going to war at this point. You think maybe it might be better to not volunteer when you come of age. But then a group of women and girls go around and call you a coward and a chicken. They say you are not man and make fun of you. You try to bear it as long as you can, but eventually that bullying gets to you. You don't want to die, but you also can't take being bullied like this any longer. So you volunteer to escape and maybe you will be lucky and survive. That whole white feather thing was basically a large-scale organized version of that girl who bullied her classmate into committing suicide. It's like the women voting to force only men into mandatory military service in a supposedly advanced society. Evil and ungrateful. Not sure if those who were essential to the war effort were likewise issued something. Both of my grandfathers volunteered and were turned down as essential. One was a butcher and one was a tool and die draftsman for de Havilland. My grandfather was told by his doctor there was no way he'd be drafted. Colorblind, half deaf, something wrong with his feet. Still got drafted. Can you fire a gun? What? Welcome aboard. Good news. Since you're already deaf, it's your choice of armor or artillery. In the US, it was kind of seen as a failure. My dad was drafted for career, but was classified as 4F, which means unfit to serve. To be eligible for class 4F, a registrant must have been found not qualified for service in the armed forces by a military entrance processing station, MEPS, under the established physical, mental, or moral standards. Not sure why. I asked him about it once and his answer was I don't know. They said something about my blood. And he never talked about it. He seemed like a fit, able-bodied guy and so on. And lived to be 81. Only dying from a medical mistake, not poor health or old age. The US military spans from insanely picky to not picky at all depending on their need. So when people ask whether they're fit for military service, the answer is where is the enemy and who's left? I had a cousin who tried to shame me because he did 4 years and I didn't. Because I broke my neck at 18 and was turned away. I obviously don't love my country as much because I broke a vertebrae. Propaganda is a crazy thing and it works so well. Somehow it's seen as a bad thing to not volunteer to potentially get killed for a country that only gives a shit about you when you're useful. People join the forces for any sort of reason, but doing so just because it's seen as patriotic is crazy. On top of that, shaming others for not doing it too. Like, no thanks man. I don't wanna fight and possibly die so the rich people can add another million into their wallets. World War I and World War II, I can see the need to fight against evil and the sacrifice people needed to make at that time. But the recent wars in the Middle East and everything. Man, that it is just a big fat no from me. I obviously don't love my country as much because I broke a vertebrae. Don't feel bad about it. I've been called a baby killer and rapist for having served in the military. You can't win either way. Had a great uncle who couldn't enlist to fight in the big war. Killed himself in 1943 because he was so shunned and abused. A button may have helped. Sorry to hear this. I didn't know him. Just sharing a story of how it was for people who wanted to fight but couldn't. You got shamed hard for being of age and not signing up back in the day. In England during World War I they used to enlist pretty young ladies to go around and hand young men white feathers, basically implying they were cowards for not being off at the war. One of the guys who got handed one was a VC recipient, George Sampson. As someone pointed out above, he was given the feather while on his way to get the VC from the king. What's VC? Victoria Cross. Essentially the Commonwealth equivalent to the American Medal of Honor. To get the Medal of Honor, the soldier must have distinguished himself conspicuously by gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty against the enemy. To get the Victoria Cross you must display most conspicuous bravery, or some daring or preeminent act of valor or self-sacrifice, or extreme devotion to duty in the presence of the enemy. The VC has a limited number, as it's cast from a specific set of captured cannons. Only around 80-85 more can be produced, ever. This was probably caused the mistakes made by the Order of the White Feather in World War I. Some of the stories about the guys who were awarded white feathers during the war while they were on leave from the front are ridiculous. Like, literally approaching Blackadder type humor. George Sampson probably being the most glaring. As in the VC recipient? Didn't she receive a slap with his playbook? It was Private Ernest Atkins who slapped a woman with his playbook after she presented him with a white feather, saying certainly I'll take your feather back to the boys at Passchendaele. I'm in civies, because people think my uniform might be lousy, but if I had it on I wouldn't be half as lousy as you. What a boy. Not everyone attempting to enlist in the Canadian Forces met the existing minimum medical, physical standards. Initially, no distinguishing button was issued to those persons rejected for failing to meet the standards. Although a committee on war service badges had recommended on the 27th of October 1939 that 2 badges be established, a service badge for those voluntarily attested for active service beyond Canada and a reserve badge for those medically exempt. Among other reasons, that recommendation was not acted upon. Instead, rejected applicants for service in the Army were issued with Form M12, Militia Form M12, Certificate of Medical Unfitness for Service in the Canadian Active Service Force. This form did not satisfy the need for an easily identified indicator of exempt status, however, and rejected applicants suffered in the eyes of the public as a result. This is something that every army should have. There is a lot of Today I Learned on World War II these days. I'm wondering if people are watching Indie Needle and Company. Is that World War I guy still around? He does World War II nowadays and collabs with Sabaton. My grandfather once told me that if you were a young man in America during World War II, people would literally stop you on the street to ask you why you weren't fighting. If Steve Rogers were Canadian, he would have the biggest buttons collection. This would have been great in the US. I had one grandfather who was rejected because of hearing problems and was only allowed to join the National Guard. He regretted that for his whole life. Both of my grandpas. The other was a World War II pilot. Always told me how World War II was a completely different thing from every war that came after. Nobody was protesting World War II. Everyone came together and worked toward a common goal. Good versus evil. Neither of them supported anything that came after Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. They should make a World War II movie about a disabled regiment fighting on the Western Front. They could have a legless tank gunner, a deaf radio operator, and a one-armed sniper. Add some explosions and Matt Damon. Team America World Police Edition. And bam. Hit movie. My father was refused in World War II for heart issues, and was embarrassed about not serving for the rest of his life. Yeah, but he got to have a rest of his life. Make sure to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell like it owes you money. Remember to post your favorite comment from the video in the comment section below for a chance to be featured in my next video. I hope you enjoyed this fantastic video and I hope you are all staying safe. Show a small channel some love by liking and subscribing. Take care. Hip hip cheerio. Much love from me, Matt British.